Have you ever felt like you're living in a world that moves too fast, while you're still standing still, trying to process a moment that everyone else already forgot? Like you're tuned into a deeper frequency that others don't even notice exists? Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because you are more aware than most people are willing to be. You notice too much. You think too far. You feel too deeply. You see behind the words. You sense the pain beneath the smiles. You feel the silence in conversations and the weight behind the things people never say. And most days, you wish you could turn it off. But you can't, because that's who you are. You feel too much, because you understand too deeply. And the deeper you understand, the heavier the world becomes, because you no longer live on the surface. You don't just hear, you listen. You don't just look, you see. And once you see it all, you can't unsee it. You watch how people hide, how they lie to themselves, how they keep smiling while they're drowning. You see through roles, masks, performances, and while the world celebrates appearances, you crave something real, something honest, even if it's messy, even if it hurts. But in a world addicted to comfort, truth is uncomfortable, depth is inconvenient, and feeling too much is considered a flaw. You've been told, stop being so sensitive. Don't overthink. Let it go. Don't take things so seriously. But no one asks what it's like to live in a mind that never turns off, in a heart that feels everything. You've probably sat in rooms full of people and still felt completely alone, not because you weren't included, but because the conversation never touched anything real, because your soul doesn't want small talk, it wants truth, it wants substance. It wants to know, who are you, really? But instead, you smile, you nod, and you shrink yourself again, because when you speak from your depth, people get quiet. When you ask real questions, they change the subject. When you express what you feel, they tell you it's too much. So you become the quiet one, the intense one, the overthinker, the one who feels too much. But here's the truth. The world isn't made for people like you, not because you're broken, but because you're awake. And awake people make others uncomfortable, not by what they say, but simply by what they see. You reflect back the parts of others they'd rather keep hidden. And so you become the mirror. And mirrors are rarely loved because they show what's real. But still, you keep seeing, you keep feeling, and you keep wondering why no one else seems to feel it the way you do. Sometimes you wonder if you're the problem, if you're really too sensitive, too complicated, too deep. But you're not. You're just living in a world that's forgotten how to feel, a world that runs from silence, avoids introspection, and fears vulnerability. You were never taught that your sensitivity is your strength, that your depth is not a defect, but a sign of intelligence, that your need for meaning isn't dramatic, it's human. You were told to quiet your voice, to hide your tears, to toughen up, to grow thicker skin. But what if your softness isn't a weakness to fix, but a light this world has forgotten? What if the reason you feel so much is because you carry the ability to transform things through empathy, through honesty, through presence? What if your pain is actually your power, and your overthinking is just another word for deep understanding? You're not here to fit in. You're here to wake people up, to remind them that silence has meaning, that not everything needs to be fixed, that there's beauty in simply feeling what's real. Maybe your purpose isn't to be loud. Maybe it's to be still, to hold space, to notice, to witness, to go deep in a world that has gone shallow. There are people in this world who walk into a room and feel everything. The energy, the tension, the unspoken things, they don't know how to block it out, they just absorb. And maybe you're one of them, not because you choose to, but because your senses are wide open, your perception is sharp, your inner world is vast. You don't just remember what was said, you remember how it felt, the tone, the pause, the micro-expression that no one else noticed. You replay conversations in your head days after they happened, not because you want to, but because your mind searches for understanding. You analyze things too deeply because your brain is wired to connect the dots. You feel too strongly because your heart refuses to go numb. You reflect too often because you can't stand living unconsciously. And yet, this depth often leaves you feeling heavy because you carry not only your own emotions, but often those of others too. You notice their pain before they do. You try to heal them, even when you're the one bleeding. And sometimes, you burn out quietly in a world that praises those who stay on fire. You're not just tired, you're emotionally overstimulated. Not from noise, but from meaning. Not from pressure, but from presence. Because when you're truly present, you feel everything. And when you feel everything, it's hard to pretend you're okay. But you do. You smile, you nod. You say, "I'm fine," because explaining this kind of sensitivity feels impossible. You've tried to put it into words, but how do you describe a mind that never stops echoing and a heart that breaks in silence? So you retreat, you pull back, you seek solitude, not to escape others, but to find yourself again. Because being around too much noise, too much fakeness, too much emotional surface drains you. You don't fear people, you fear disconnection. You crave authenticity like oxygen. And that's what makes you feel alone, because most people are looking for comfort. You're looking for truth. Most people want distractions. You want depth. Most people want to feel better. You want to understand why you hurt. And yet, you often get punished for it. People label you dramatic, too deep, too intense. But they don't see the beauty in the way you break, the courage in the way you feel, the intelligence in the way you reflect. You don't just see the world, you sense it. You taste the emotion in the air. You feel history in people's eyes. You read pain in silence. You hear the stories that never get told. But no one prepared you for that. No one told you how to live in a world that numbs itself to survive, while you stay awake to feel. So you've learned to protect yourself, sometimes with silence, sometimes with distance, sometimes with pretending. And all the while, you carry the weight of everything you can't explain. But here's the thing, the world needs people like you, people who can't be fake, people who cry when it matters, people who see beyond the smile, people who speak up even when their voice shakes. Because while others perform, you feel. And while others rush, you pause. You don't chase what everyone chases. You search for what's real. You don't want easy. You want honest, you don't want noise, you want clarity, and maybe that's why you struggle to fit in. Because you're not here to fit, you're here to feel, to heal, to understand, to connect. So stop asking if you're too much. Start asking if they're just too numb. You're not too emotional, you're just awake in a sleeping world. You're not too intense, you just refuse to be shallow. You're not too complicated, you're just built for truth. And yes, it's hard. Being who you are in this world will cost you. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be called dramatic. You'll feel alone. But you'll also find something they never will. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from ignorance, but the kind that grows from knowing your soul has never lied to you. You will find people who speak your language, who feel the same wind in their chest, who ask the same silent questions, who don't flinch when you show your heart. And when that happens, you'll finally feel seen. Not for how well you perform, but for how deeply you care. Not for how strong you appear, but for how much you risk feeling. There's a kind of strength that doesn't look like strength. It looks like staying soft in a world that rewards numbness. It looks like breaking and choosing to rebuild yourself without anyone even knowing. It looks like feeling everything and still showing up. You've survived things no one saw you go through. You've carried emotions that didn't belong to you just to help someone else breathe. You've held space when no one held it for you. That's strength. That's power. That's you. And maybe you don't always have the words. Maybe you can't always explain why you feel what you feel, why certain things hit you harder, why silence sometimes hurts more than words, why connection is so rare and loneliness feels familiar. But you feel it, and that knowing is what makes you real. Because you don't chase a perfect life, you chase an authentic one. You don't want surface-level peace. You want inner alignment. You want the kind of life that doesn't just look good, but feels honest. And that's rare. That's powerful. That's sacred. You were never here to blend in. You were born to bring depth to a world afraid of its own reflection. You were born to speak what others silence. to feel what others run from, to question what others accept. And yes, that will cost you, but it will also free you. Because when you stop trying to be what they want, you make space for who you are, and who you are isn't too much, isn't too sensitive, isn't broken. It's someone who still feels in a world that numbs, and that in itself is a revolution. You may never be fully understood by the masses, but that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're rare. It means you're walking a path that doesn't come with a map. It means you're awake in a world that dreams of comfort. And your presence, even in its quietest form, is a reminder that truth still exists. Depth still matters. Feeling is still sacred. So don't dim yourself just to make others comfortable. Don't shrink your heart because they fear what's inside it. Don't numb your soul just because they're not ready to meet it. You feel too much because you were never meant to live halfway. You were meant to go all in, to love with your whole being, to hurt with your whole chest, to speak with your full voice, to create from your core, to live a life that means something, even if it's quieter, slower, more tender than most. And if you ever feel like you don't belong, remember, that's exactly what makes you belong to the people who matter. You don't need a million connections. You just need one that's real, one space where you don't have to explain, one presence that feels like home, one moment where you are held, not judged. And that's enough. Your depth is not the enemy. It's your compass, your superpower, your truth. So honor it, listen to it, let it lead. Because somewhere out there, someone else is wondering if they're too much too. And when they hear your voice, they'll know they're not alone. Let the world keep rushing. You'll stay rooted. Let the world stay loud. You'll speak with stillness. Let the world numb itself. You'll keep feeling. Because that's where beauty lives. That's where truth breathes. That's where you are. You feel too much because you understand too deeply. And in the end, that is your gift. Not everyone will understand it, but those who do will never forget it.